Today's lie is number 274. It is a small white pill, chalky and stamped with a code I no longer remember. The sun has just begun to touch the rooftop solar panels, and the laptop on the counter shows a thin trickle of power flowing into the batteries. The number is 1.1 amps, and I log it in the ledger, a heavy book with a worn leather cover that belonged to my father. Every entry is a testament to order. The water purifier has yielded another 3 liters, and I note that down too before moving to the inventory. The shelves are dark wood, and the bottles are arranged by function with their labels facing perfectly forward. I count the amoxicillin, the insulin, the saline drips. Everything is in its place, just as it was yesterday. The world outside may have ended 9 months ago, but in here, inside Bellagio's apothecary, the world holds. I remember the beginning of the hush, when the city's sound changed from a constant engine roar to a chorus of sirens that slowly faded over 3 days. The air acquired a chemical smell of bleach as people tried to scrub away the sickness, but soon that was replaced by a sweet, rotten odor that clung to everything. My wife had already left with our daughter, and my father was already gone, so I was alone to watch the end through the reinforced glass. I just locked the doors and waited. My final ritual for the morning is the pill. I take it from a large amber bottle filled with thousands of other placebos, identical little lies. I hold it between my thumb and forefinger and walk to the main counter. On the smooth wood surface sits a single clear glass beaker. It is nearly half full of pills, one for every morning I have woken up sober in the new world. I open my hand and let number 274 drop. It makes a soft click as it joins the others. This routine is my prayer, and the beaker is its monument. The silence that follows is absolute and perfect. It is the reward for my discipline. Then a sound erupts that feels like a physical blow. A frantic, rhythmic banging starts on the front steel shutter. The sound is so loud it seems to shake the bottles on the shelves. It is the first human noise I have heard from outside in months that wasn't a distant scream or a gunshot. A woman's voice follows, raw with panic. Joelle Dao, I know you are in there. I freeze, my hand still hovering over the beaker. My name sounds alien, a word from another life. It's Aziza Abdel. From the meetings. You shared your Day 90 story, the one about your father. I knew you would understand. I stumble back from the counter and move toward the small security monitor next to the door. The camera shows a woman's face, tight with desperation. It is Aziza. I remember her from the circle of folding chairs in the church basement, a quiet woman with haunted eyes who never said much. She is holding a small bundle of blankets against her chest. I want to turn off the monitor and pretend she is not there. My sobriety is a fragile structure, and she is a hurricane at the door. I watch, paralyzed by indecision, and then the bundle in her arms moves. It is a child. I do not move. I cannot. The sanctuary must hold. Aziza sees the camera, and her eyes plead with me through the grainy screen. She must see that I am not responding, because her face hardens with a new resolve. She turns away from the shutter and runs to a battered pickup truck parked across the street. The engine sputters to life, a monstrous roar that defiles the quiet morning. I watch in horror as she puts the truck in gear and rams it directly into the side of a rusted sedan near the pharmacy entrance. The shriek of tortured metal is the loudest sound I have ever heard. It echoes down the empty streets, a catastrophic announcement of our presence. She has rung the dinner bell for every predator within a mile. Leaving them out there now is not an option. It is a murder. I lunge for the door, my hands shaking so badly I can barely work the bolts. I throw the heavy steel door open just enough to pull her and the child inside. She stumbles in, breathing in ragged gasps, clutching her unconscious son. I slam the door and lock it, my heart hammering against my ribs. The silence returns, but it feels different now, heavy and dangerous. Then a single gunshot cracks through the air, much closer this time. It is not a random shot, it is an answer. It has to be Lazocelin. The name hit me like a physical blow, a word from a life I had buried. I knelt beside the boy, my fingers on his wrist, feeling the thready, rapid pulse. His skin was hot and tight, a dark red inflammation spreading up his leg from a ragged cut on his calf. The flesh around the wound was turning a bruised purplish black, necrotizing fasciitis. She was right about the diagnosis, and I was a pharmacist again, the knowledge rising unbidden like bile. I looked at Aziza, seeing the graphic designer I recognized from meetings replaced by a stranger with hollowed eyes and a raw intensity that scared me. She had read about the drug on some medical printout her husband, a pharmaceutical rep, had left behind. He had marketed it as a last resort antibiotic, a weapon for when everything else had failed. There might be a vial, I admitted, my voice rough from disuse. But it's in the C12. I stood up and led her through the pharmacy's quiet aisles, our footsteps the only sound in the world. We passed the neatly organized shelves, a testament to my rigid control, and went into the back room. The C12 vault stood against the far wall, a modern steel box that looked out of place among the old wooden fixtures. It was my father's last great investment after a robbery scared him senseless. I pressed my thumb to the biometric scanner, and a small LCD screen above it flickered on, its green text glowing in the dimness. Bellagio and Son, security, protocol, lucidity clause. My father designed it, I said, the words tasting like ash. The vault only opens between 2 and 4 in the morning. I paused, unable to look at her as I explained the rest. And the biometrics require my blood alcohol content to be at or above 0.08. She said nothing. I finally turned to her and saw the hope in her face curdle into a look of profound horror. The machine's screen reflected in her wide eyes. He was so afraid of me, I continued, the confession spilling out. So certain I'd sell the narcotics to feed my habit. He said the only time I was a threat was when I was lucid and thinking clearly about my next score. This was his solution. Aziza stared from the glowing screen to her son, who was now moaning softly on the cot I had set up for him. The choice was not about a lock and a key, it was about a ghost and a bottle. Please, Joelle, she begged, her voice cracking. There has to be another way. We can try to break it open. It's a half-ton of reinforced steel bolted to the foundation, I said, my anger flaring. You can't break it open. I walked back into the main room and picked up a small glass beaker from the counter. It was filled with clear water. I held it up for her to see. This is 274 days of war, I told her. Every morning I measure this out. I hold it. I think about what it could be, and then I pour it into a plant. You are asking me to surrender. You are asking me to lose the only war I have ever been close to winning. I offered her amoxicillin, ciprofloxacin, anything else on the shelves, my pharmacist brain rattling off names that I knew were just useless tokens against the infection ravaging her son. She just shook her head, her gaze fixed on me with a terrible, patient stillness. A flicker on the small security monitor behind the counter caught my eye. It was a grainy black and white feed from a camera pointed at the street. On the roof of the building across from us, something caught the faint moonlight. A glint of light on glass, a scope, a curator. My blood went cold. Get down, I whispered. We scrambled into the stockroom, the darkest part of the pharmacy. I pointed to a window high on the wall, covered with plywood. We need to block that, I said. We shoved a heavy metal crate full of expired saline bags against the wall. As the crate scraped into place, Aziza rapped her knuckles on the wall next to the boarded-up window. The sound was hollow. It was just drywall, with a clumsy patch job near the floor. They could get through here, she said, her voice flat. The brick foundation is behind it. I think, I lied, pushing the crate sideways to cover the weak spot. I did not want to think about how thin the walls of my fortress really were. We were trapped together, the threat outside pressing in while the one inside us grew louder. The boy began to convulse. It was a violent, jerking seizure that threw him against the sides of the cot. A low, guttural rattle came from his throat, the sound of his lungs filling with fluid. The illusion that we had time to debate anything evaporated in that awful noise. He was dying right now, on my floor. Aziza watched for a moment, her face a mask of stone. Then she stood up and walked with a steady purpose to a small supply closet under the stairs. She rumbled around for a moment before emerging with a dusty bottle of whiskey, something my father must have kept for special customers or bad nights. She walked back to the main counter and placed the bottle down with a solid click. It stood directly beside my beaker of clear placebo water. Her voice was cold, stripped of all its earlier pleading. "You talk about your atonement in pills. Here it is in a bottle. Let God be the judge of which one works." I stared at the amber liquid next to the beaker, my damnation and his salvation, sitting side by side. For the first time in 274 days, my hand began to tremble. A voice boomed from outside, amplified and unnervingly calm, cutting through the silence. "This location has been designated a public health asset. The unauthorized occupant has 10 minutes to surrender." Go lied. The siege had begun. Trapped, I looked past Aziza, past the dying child, and my gaze landed on the dark screen of the C-12 vault. I could see the words in my mind, glowing green. Lucidity. Claws. I saw my own gaunt reflection in the dark panel and realized I had spent every one of my 274 sober days arguing with that screen, trying to prove its premise wrong. I was not achieving redemption. I was still performing for my dead father, trying to earn the approval he took to his grave. True atonement was not about proving him wrong about my sobriety. It was about proving him wrong about my heart. It was about making the one sacrifice he never believed I was capable of, sober or drunk. I looked from the ghost of my father in my head to the rattling, gasping child on the floor. I closed my eyes, took a long, slow breath, and reached for the bottle. The whiskey burned a familiar path down my throat, a searing memory of every failure I had ever swallowed. I set the small glass beaker down on the counter with a click that sounded louder than Golid's amplified voice. Outside, a heavy rhythmic thud began against the reinforced back door, the sound of a battering ram finding its work. Each impact was a beat in a countdown. I was a pharmacist again, prescribing my own poison. I poured another precise measure of the amber liquid into the beaker, the same beaker that had held my clear water of redemption every morning. I was calculating the dose needed to bring my blood alcohol to the required level, a cold and scientific self-destruction. Aziza stood by the cot where her son lay, a silent, pained witness to my surrender. She did not look away. She watched me drink the second dose, her expression a terrible mixture of gratitude and pity. The warmth spread through my veins, a treacherous comfort that loosened the knots in my shoulders. A voice I thought I had strangled long ago whispered a single seductive word inside my head. Moria. The trembling in my hands lessened, replaced by a different kind of unsteadiness, a swaying of the soul. The thudding on the door grew louder, more insistent. I was fighting myself again, and the enemy was already inside the walls. The digital clock on the wall read 3017 a.m. I was drunk, swaying on my feet as I lurched towards the back room. The world had a soft, blurry edge to it. The curators were splintering the wood around the door's steel frame now. Balig's breathing was a faint, shallow whisper, almost gone. I stumbled, my shoulder crashing into a metal shelf stacked with pill bottles. The clatter of plastic on the concrete floor was a sharp betrayal, announcing my exact position to the men outside. I reached the vault and pressed my palm against the cool biometric panel. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild and panicked bird. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a brilliant green light flashed and the heavy lock clicked open. The steel door swung inward with a silent, heavy grace, revealing its contents. A single small vial of lezocillin sat on a shelf, and below it, stacked in neat government crates, were the sealed bottles of OxyContin and fentanyl. It was the heart of my damnation, the dragon's hoard that my father had built this cage to contain. My hand closed around the small, cold vial of antibiotic just as the back door exploded inward. A shower of splintered wood and torn metal flew into the room. Two curators in dark tactical gear poured through the opening, rifles raised. A strange clarity cut through the alcoholic haze, a purpose so sharp it sobered me. I turned and threw the vial to Aziza. "The basement wall. Go." She caught it, her eyes wide with fear and understanding. As she scrambled toward the weak point we had found, Ezio Golide stepped through the ruined doorway. He was calm, his rifle leveled at my chest. "The people thank you for your stewardship," he said, his voice even and without emotion. "But this collection now reverts to the curators of the pharmacopoeia. It will be preserved, unlike you." I did not surrender. I did not look at him. My eyes were fixed on the open vault, on the neat stacks of pills that had cost me my family, my father, my life. I reached behind me on the dispensary counter, and my fingers found a large bottle of high-proof rubbing alcohol and a roll of gauze. As Aziza's frantic smashing echoed from the stockroom, I unscrewed the cap and stuffed a length of the white cloth into the bottle's neck. I lit the end with a disposable lighter from my pocket. I did not look at Golida. I looked at my addiction made manifest. With a final, guttural scream of rage and liberation, I hurled the flaming bottle into the vault. The C-12 erupted in a furious, chemical-fueled inferno. The packing material and the plastic bottles of opioids ignited at once, sending a wave of heat and toxic smoke billowing into the room. The drugs that were the source of my ruin became the fuel for my redemption. The intensity of the fire and the choking black smoke forced Golida and his men to retreat back through the broken doorway, their prize now a burning pyre. In the alley next door, Aziza tore the cap from the vial and plunged the needle into her son's leg. As Balig took his first clear, deep breath, she looked back at the orange glow of the burning apothecary and understood the price that had been paid. The fire consumed the shelves, the counter, everything I had built to protect myself. I stood with the old shotgun in my hands, a final silhouette against the flames, my sobriety and my addiction and my life offered up in a single purifying fire.